Joining me now to discuss this is Howard Lavine. He's a political psychology professor at the University of Minnesota. Good morning. Thanks so much for being with us.
Good morning. It's nice to be with you.
So for all those people who are feeling anxious really around the world, you're here to tell us that election anxiety is a real thing.
Most definitely is a real thing. That's for sure. The kind of classical recipe for anxiety is an uncertain event about which you have no control. And that is magnified by the fact that the parties are enormously polarized. The voters are not only concerned about issues, but they're concerned about whether a co-partisan wins on psychological grounds. So they feel like my country has been restored, or the country is now governed by someone like me. My cultural values are being thrust back into the culture, or whether I continue to be alienated from the culture. This would be from the right. From the left, I think it is about abortion. It is also about identity. But because the stakes are so high, and I think the reason they are is because one of the candidates has made any number of pronouncements that he would not govern along democratic lines to the extent that he could manage that. And in the second Trump term, the guardrails will be off from the very beginning. And so it's a variety of interesting reasons why people are feeling election anxiety. It's not just about policy.
Right. Now, I've heard of people saying they can't think about anything else but the election. They're putting their lives on hold. They just want this day to be over. What are the symptoms of election anxiety?
They're generally just obsessive thoughts. The people are running through their minds various scenarios about how awful things will be if their candidate loses. A lot of this is I would put down to misinformation, especially on the Republican side of the aisle. Perhaps the greatest story on the Republican side is that the election will be stolen. Now, we have very high quality election monitoring in this country. There might be itty bitty amounts of election fraud, but not nearly enough to have an impact on even a very close election. So these voters are worried, legitimately worried about the idea that's being spread within their social circles that their candidate and their party is being cheated out of a victory, and so that is also very alarming to them. It would be to those on the left if they felt like that's what was happening to them. They don't feel that way.
Do you think that fear is motivating people to get out and vote? We saw over 80 million people cast their ballots in early voting, and the lineups are long today.
I don't think it's fear, but it's to speak to fear. Fear can have a polarizing effect. Among more engaged voters, fear will produce engagement, and among less engaged voters, fear can produce disengagement. The interesting thing is those that are less engaged in politics, what we call low information voters or low propensity voters, they're not experiencing as much election anxiety because their identities are not as entrenched with the partisan system. So we're mostly talking about people who are highly engaged in politics and are likely to turn out more than they might otherwise would. 2020 was a high watermark in American election turnout. We might get close to that today.
Final quick thought from you, please, on how to manage anxiety.
Well, what psychologists tell us is that you need to occupy your mind, and it's quite commonsensical. It's harder to do, than to know, but you need to do something that is action-oriented. There are many things that can take up our consciousness. Those kinds of things, generally require some level of high effort action, and that, go on a hike, do something that requires physical exertion, do something that requires mental exertion, get absorbed in a book. This will all be over very soon, perhaps not tonight, But I think voters, if they're feeling highly anxious, just need to get up and do something else. Lying on the couch or sitting around thinking about it, I'm going to make it worse.
Or watching TV or your phone all day. Howard, thanks so
Yes.
much. Howard Lavine is a political psychology professor at the University of Minnesota.